Sciences Department. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, there we go. Got it unmuted. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I want to talk to you about, the mental health aspect of COVID-19 and how you and your department are looking at this currently, and what advice you may have for those watching.
Oh, what a great question. I think for our specific population, especially, we work with children who have really challenging behaviors and disorders, and diagnoses that are difficult for families and caregivers to manage on a good day. And so then to throw this mix in and expect these families and parents to handle everything and keep peace in the kingdom is a pretty big expectation. And then on top of that, the issues of the children, we've definitely seen some increased needs in just, the parents and adults who are saying, gosh, I thought I was doing okay and I thought I was managing things, but I think I could use a little extra help. So I do think we've seen that mental health need rise a little bit, and the intensity, has increased a little bit with everything going on.
What advice would you have for people when it comes to maintaining your sanity and your mental health during this time? As you're kind of, everyone's going through the same thing, and you're getting a barrage of bad news over and over again throughout the day. And, how kids home now, if you have kids, and just a million different things going on. What advice, what tips would you have for those who are feeling, some anxiety, and to, maintain their sanity during this?
Absolutely. I think, again, where we focus a lot on families and, high risk youth, it often comes down to structure. And that has been one of the biggest challenges we've heard from our clients is, I thought I had enough of this, or I thought we were doing okay before. But that's been, I think, if I could say one primary thing, it seems like if we can help them create some structure, some routine, get sort of a schedule and something in place to where all family members know what's happening and when it's happening and what to expect, that seems to help everybody sort of, okay, we can figure this out from there.
I also, I've seen these reports on the news about a rise in domestic violence. And, and that being like an issue of COVID-19, this idea that we're supposed to stay at home and stay at place. And, some folks aren't in great relationships, and there's been a rise there. What advice do you have there?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. I think we work a lot with individuals on coping strategies, and that feels a little cliche to say with everything, all of that stress, but I guess it's one of those times where you're really testing out, have you figured out what really helps you to calm down, remain centered? Do you have those strategies on board and in place? Or, is that something that maybe you need to spend a little more time on, or some assistance developing those skills? Because man, it's this type of situation that really tests that and requires you to utilize that toolbox, so to speak. And if you've got a person that doesn't have a lot of tools in their toolbox, then that's likely why you'd see something like that happening. It's just maybe stretch them past the level that they're able to handle.
You mentioned your department works with families and high risk youth. When you say high risk youth, who are you talking about there, and how are they coping with COVID-19?
So our population are children with behavioral disorders and diagnoses. So that includes autism, but it also includes children with oppositional defiant disorder or with comorbid disorders where they may have some really severe anxiety or even bipolar, a diagnosis like that. And then maybe they also have some developmental disabilities or autism on as well. And so really, for us, it's the kids that have the biggest, most severe problem behavior. It's not really about the diagnosis, it's the behavior that we're seeing, and working with those families. So I think, the impact on them is pretty large in the sense that all of their previously defined routines and expectations are kind of out the window. And that's been something we've really been working on, is whether we're using telemed or smaller groups or whatever those changes have to be, we're trying to continue to deliver those services. You know, these are essential treatment services for these kids and these families. And so that's been our biggest focus, is to keep that going for them. And like I said, even if it has to look differently. But yeah, they're struggling with, you know, having to be in their home environment, which may be chaotic and may have been what was sort of triggering some of these behaviors in the first place. And now they're there a lot more. And again, really tapping into and using the toolbox that we hope we've helped them to establish. And it's really showing us if we've done a good job or not, or if there's a lot more work to do.
When and how should folks reach out to your department?
So that's something that we've started internally, but are looking at maybe as an option for our communities at a bigger level. We have a pretty good communication chain set up where families can go to their assigned supervisor, their clinician. Most of our families have a team of people with us, so there's lots of folks they can reach out to. But just in case there's a crisis or an emergency, or they can't get where they need to go, we've established this sort of crisis service hotline that they can call immediately and get to somebody, and we can try to get them to the most helpful resource of what they're needing. And we've included, as a current client, we probably would have just focused on their treatment and their goals, and now we've sort of adapted that to include maybe community resources or some of the assistance that's available right now. So they're calling in maybe and saying, I'm handling my kids okay, or I'm handling my anxiety, but I'm really stressed about finances and I don't know where to start. So that's something we can kind of offer some support through on that hotline. And that's like I said, a thought we've had for, why can't we have other people in the community calling too? And we'll get those calls, but because they're not a current client, there's some, issues around being able to provide them with very much support. So that's what we're kind of looking at, is there a way that we could offer this bigger and bypass a lot of the red tape and the barriers that, even if you're not a current client, we want to get you some assistance. Let's get you somebody to talk to.
What has been like the most inbound you've been seeing? I mean, the most common question or the most common issue that's being brought to your department since all of this started?
I would say that it is that concern of parents trying to set up the right structure and get the right, systems in place at home so that their kids can be successful. Again, where we serve kids sometimes with pretty intensive needs, they're in treatment, 30, 35, even 40 hours a week. So this is a really significant change for them. And so that's probably right now the biggest, is parents that are saying, I've got my kids home all day, every day. How do I find success in this? How do we avoid major problems?
Well, Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll bring you back on as this thing progresses. And if anybody needs to check out your department, they know how to do that. The Utah Behavioral Sciences Department. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yep. Have a great one.
You too.